Chapter 1: The Neighbor in the Denim Shirt. The dining room wallpaper had faded to the color of old dishwater, a pattern of vines that seemed to strangle themselves in perpetual brown-yellow twilight. Cody watched a moth circle the overhead fixture, one of those brass chandeliers with frosted glass shades shaped like tulips turned upside down, trapping the dead flies of previous summers in their bell-shaped tombs. The table was set with mismatched plates, the good ones having been broken years ago in an incident nobody discussed anymore, and his mother spooned mashed potatoes onto each dish with mechanical precision, her wrist rotating in that same endless circle she'd been making for what seemed like centuries. "So this character next door," his father was saying, forking peas onto his plate with the deliberate slowness of a man trying to sound casual, "says hello to me this afternoon." Well, hello isn't quite right. He sort of acknowledged my existence, like a nod, but not really a nod. More like he tilted his whole body 2 degrees in my direction while staring at something over my left shoulder. His father's tie was loosened, the knot hanging at his sternum like a wilted flower. He worked for a company that manufactured components for other companies, that manufactured components for other companies, Russian nesting doll of industrial purposelessness that Cody had never quite understood. Something about ball bearings for machines that stamped out ball bearings. Or maybe it was the other way around. His father sometimes came home with grease on his Oxford shirts that his mother attacked with stained stick and fury. "Did he say anything else?" Cody's mother asked, her voice carrying that half-interested tone she used when she was really calculating something else entirely, probably, whether there was enough milk for tomorrow's breakfast or if someone needed to make a run to the store before it closed. "Nope." Just sort of stood there in this denim denim, like he'd walked out of some Dust Bowl photograph and looked at me the way you'd look at a cloud that might or might not turn into rain. Then he went back inside. Corey snorted, his mouth full of pot roast. At 16, Cody's brother had achieved a kind of casual supremacy that Cody both envied and resented. 2 weeks ago, Corey had scored the winning touchdown in a game against Lincoln High, and the house still hummed with the residual electricity of that triumph. Their mother had cut out the tiny mention in the newspaper 3 lines buried in the sports section and put it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. "Maybe he's one of those hermit types," Corey said, swallowing. "You know, like he's been living alone so long he forgot how people work." The neighborhood was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen in real time, where events occurred in the gaps between observations, like stop-motion animation. Houses squatted on their foundations with the patience of sleeping dogs. The streetlights came on at dusk with a collective hum that sounded like distant bees. Every lawn looked like every other lawn, and every car in every driveway was some shade of beige or silver or that particular blue that seemed designed to be forgotten. But this new neighbor the man in the denim shirt had moved in with a quietness that was almost aggressive. No moving trucks, no furniture carried up walkways. One day the house had been empty, its windows reflecting nothing but sky, and the next day there were curtains thin, the color of old newspaper and the sense of occupancy, as if he'd materialized there like condensation. "Cody, did you finish your history homework?" His mother's voice cut through his thoughts like a knife through aspic. Here it was, the nag, the persistent erosive worry she'd been applying to him like sandpaper for the past 3 weeks. "Most of it," he said, which was true in the sense that he'd opened the book and read the first paragraph about manifest destiny before his mind had wandered to other territories entirely. "Most of it isn't going to get you into a good college," she said, and Cody felt the familiar weight settle on his shoulders, that invisible yoke of future expectations, of shoes not yet taken, of applications not yet filled out for institutions he couldn't yet imagine wanting to attend. "He's 13, Mom," Corey said, defending him with the casualness of someone who'd already secured his own position in the family hierarchy. "He's got time." "Almost 14, Cody corrected quietly. "Almost 14. his mother repeated, as if those extra months were already slipping through her fingers like sand through an hourglass, each grain a missed opportunity for achievement. After dinner, Cody retreated to his room, where his collection waited for him like a secret garden. Baseball cards pristine in their plastic sleeves, organized by year and team and player statistics that he'd memorized with the devotion of a monk studying sacred texts. He had cards going back to the 50s, some of them acquired through trades at school, others purchased with saved allowance money at the card shop on Miller Street, where the owner, a man named Dennis with a wandering eye and breath that smelled like coffee and regret, would sometimes throw in a few commons for free if Cody bought enough packs. The cards were portals to other worlds, other times. The photographs showed men in baggy uniforms standing in stadiums that no longer existed, their faces serious with the weight of being immortalized. Some of the players were dead now, Cody knew, but here they were, forever 23 or 31, forever poised at the plate or winding up for a pitch that would never actually leave their hand. He was arranging his 1962 Roger Maris cards when he heard the knock at the door downstairs, muffled voices, his father's surprised tone. Then footsteps on the stairs and his father's head appearing in the doorway. "The guy next door wants to hire you and Corey to clean out his garage," his father said, his expression hovering somewhere between amusement and bewilderment. "Says he'll pay $20 each." $20. Cody calculated quickly that was at least 4 packs of cards, maybe 5 if he went to the grocery store instead of the card shop, where the markup was criminal. "Did you talk to him?" Cody asked. "No. He put a note under the door. Typed. On a typewriter, I think. The letters are all uneven, and the E is slightly raised. A note under the door. Payment under the door." The man was constructing his interactions like something from a Kafka story they'd read in English class. Last year, all bureaucracy and distance, all transaction without contact. Saturday arrived in a wash of pale sunlight that turned the street into something resembling a watercolor left out in the rain. Cody and Corey stood in the driveway of the house next door, a mirror image of their own house. The same builder having erected the entire neighborhood in 1967 like a assembly line of domestic tana. Aspiration and regarded the garage with the wariness of archaeologists approaching an unsealed tomb. The man had left another note, this one taped to the garage door. "Everything in boxes to the curb." "Thank you." The handwriting was strange, precise, but somehow feverish, the letters leaning forward as if racing toward the period at the end of the sentence. Inside, the garage was cooler than it should have been, the air holding that particular quality of places that have been sealed too long. Boxes were stacked along the walls with the geometric precision of a mind that needed order the way lungs needed air. Most were labeled in that same racing handwriting: books, clothes, kitchen. They worked in relative silence, the kind of companionable quiet that brothers could sometimes achieve when there was physical labor to distract from the usual territorial disputes. Corey was stronger, and he took the heavier boxes, leaving Cody to handle the lighter ones, the clink of dishes wrapped in newspaper, the soft weight of folded linens. It was in the 3rd hour, when the sun had climbed high enough to turn the street outside into a white gold ribbon, that Cody found the box. It wasn't labeled. It sat apart from the others, in a corner behind an old bicycle with flat tires, the cardboard darker than the rest, as if it had absorbed moisture or shadow or time itself. Cody dragged it out into the pale light filtering through the garage door and opened the flaps. Inside, a collection of objects that had no business being together. A hot pink tuxedo jacket, the fabric somehow both garish and mournful, the shoulders padded in that aggressive style that already seemed dated, as if it had been purchased for a wedding or a prom in some other decade entirely. Beneath it, a book, The Raven and Other Poems by Edgar Allan Poe. The cover worn to the softness of skin, the spine cracked in multiple places from repeated reading. A photograph faded to the colors of old Polaroid sepia and ghost blue showing a nightclub interior, the kind of place that might have existed in Miami or New Orleans, all Art Deco curves and shadows. Someone had written on the back in pencil, Coconut Grove, 1989.
There were other things, stranger things.
A map, hand-drawn, showing streets that Cody didn't recognize, labeled with names like Shell Road, an Indian village site, and inexplicably Dusttown High, a small, smooth stone that felt heavier than it should, like it contained more mass than its size suggested. And at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper that crumbled at his touch, a baseball card. Cody's hands trembled as he unwrapped it, his collector's instinct already cataloging the condition, the ERA, the potential value. But when he saw it, his breath caught. It wasn't from any set he recognized. The photograph showed a baseball player in a uniform, yes, but the image was wrong, somehow too sharp, too clear, printed on cardstock that felt simultaneously cheap and futuristic. The player's face was turned slightly away from the camera, and the team name on the jersey was one Cody had never heard of, the Dusttown Pioneers. But it was the back of the card that made his scalp prickle. Instead of statistics, there was only a single line of text, printed in that same uneven typewriter font. Some paths circle back to their beginning.
You find something?
Corey called from across the garage, hoisting another box onto his shoulder. Cody slipped the card into his pocket, some instinct telling him to keep this discovery private, at least for now. Just junk, he said, and helped his brother carry the box to the curb. That night, lying in bed, Cody took out the card and examined it under his desk lamp. The player's face half turned, the strange team name, the cryptic message on the back. He thought about the hot pink tuxedo and the book of Poe poems and the map of streets that didn't exist or didn't exist here. In this neighborhood, in this city, in this particular fold of reality.
Somewhere in the house next door,
the man in the denim shirt was doing whatever men in denim shirts did when they lived alone in houses that they'd moved into without moving trucks, leaving notes under doors and paying for services they never acknowledged in person. And somewhere in Cody's pocket, a baseball card that shouldn't exist was waiting to tell him something, though he didn't yet know what. Outside, a dog barked 3 times and fell silent. The streetlights hummed their electric lullaby. The neighborhood settled into its nightly routine of sleep and small sounds, and in the spaces between houses, in the gaps where one property ended and another began, the past and future pressed against each other like pages in a book that someone was slowly, inexorably closing. $20 appeared under their door the next morning, in an envelope that smelled faintly of tobacco and old paper. The man next door had kept his promise. But he'd given them something else, too, something that Cody would carry in his pocket for weeks afterward, taking it out in quiet moments to study the impossible card and wonder about circles that bent back to meet themselves, about time that didn't flow forward so much as pool in eddies and strange currents, and about neighbors who moved in without furniture and paid without contact and left boxes full of futures that had already somehow happened. In his dreams that night, Cody saw a small figure climbing a mountain on a game show, yodeling, and then falling with a comic crash that echoed like the tolling of a bell.
He saw raw meat on a white plate, still pulsing.
He saw people in robes standing in a grove of trees, their faces obscured by shadow. He saw a woman and a man in a car, driving fast down a shell road, their laughter crystalline and doomed. And through it all, the same face, half-turned, refusing to reveal itself completely, a silhouette against a burning sky. When he woke, the card was still in his pocket, and the house next door was silent, and the morning arrived in its usual wash of pale light, as if nothing had changed at all. Chapter 2, the card returned. The card lived in Cody's pocket for 3 days like a ticking clock, a small rectangle of wrong that pressed against his thigh through the denim of his jeans whenever he sat down. He took it out 17 times. On Monday he counted, holding it up to different sources of light, as if illumination might reveal some hidden watermark, some explanation for why a baseball card would exist for a team that had never played in any league he could find in his baseball encyclopedia, that thick tome he'd purchased at a library sale for $2, its pages smelling of must and the dreams of previous owners, the Dusttown Pioneers. He'd searched for them during study hall, pretending to work on algebra while actually paging through the microfiche archives in the library, spinning the wheel that made decades blur past like a shuffled deck of cards. Nothing. No team, no league, no mention of any Dusttown having a baseball franchise. The closest he'd come was a brief reference to a mining settlement in Arizona that had dried up in the 1930s, leaving behind nothing but the husks of buildings and a single photograph of a Main Street that looked like the set of a Western after the actors had all gone home. But it was the printing that bothered him most. The cardstock was too smooth, too uniform. The photograph too crisp, too digital, though that word didn't quite mean what it would mean in the future. He sensed something computer-generated about the image, something that belonged to a technology that didn't exist yet, or at least didn't exist in the world of baseball cards, where images were still grainy, still captured on film and printed through processes that left their fingerprints of imperfection on every card. By Tuesday afternoon, the guilt had begun to metabolize in his stomach like bad milk. The card wasn't his. It belonged to the man next door, the man in the denim shirt who'd never shown his face, who'd hired them to clean his garage and paid them through the impersonal medium of an envelope slipped under a door. Keeping it felt like theft, even though the card had been in a box marked for the curb, technically abandoned property, fair game for anyone who wanted to claim it. But Cody couldn't shake the feeling that the card was important, that it meant something. That same instinct that told him which baseball cards would appreciate in value, which players were on the cusp of greatness, that same intuition was screaming at him now that this card was significant in ways he couldn't articulate. Wednesday after school he made his decision. He would return it. The afternoon had that particular quality of March light that made everything look slightly overexposed, as if the world had been left too long in a developer's bath. Cody stood on his front porch with the card in his hand, wrapped now in a piece of notebook paper on which he'd written, in his neatest handwriting, "Found this in one of the boxes. Thought you might want it back. Cody from next door." Simple. Direct. The kind of note that wouldn't require a response but might invite one. He walked across the strip of lawn that separated the two properties, his family's grass slightly longer, more ragged, while the neighbor's was trimmed with geometric precision, each blade the same height as its fellows, a lawn that suggested obsessive maintenance, or perhaps just the free time that came with living alone. The front door was painted a color that might have been blue once but had faded to something closer to gray, the color of smoke or distant rain. Cody raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. The note the man had left them had been so deliberate in its distance. Everything in boxes to the curb. Thank you. No invitation for contact, no suggestion that face-to-face interaction was desired or even tolerated. He tried the doorbell instead. A chime sounded somewhere deep in the house, 2 notes descending and then silence. Cody waited, counting to 30 in his head the way his mother had taught him when he was small and afraid of the dark 30 seconds being the amount of time it takes for fear to pass, or at least to transform into something more manageable. No one came. He tried again. Same chime, same silence, same sense of a house holding its breath. The mailbox, then. That seemed safe, impersonal. But when he opened it, the metal door squeaking on hinges that needed oil, he found its stuffed full day's worth of mail crammed in there like evidence of neglect or deliberate avoidance. Catalogs for companies that didn't exist anymore or didn't exist yet. Coupon circulars. A postcard advertising a nightclub in Coconut Grove, the same name he'd seen written on the back of that photograph in the box. He couldn't add to this overflow. The card and his note would just get lost, crushed, forgotten. Under the door, then, the same way the man had communicated with them. Cody knelt on the concrete stoop and slipped the wrapped card underneath into the darkness of the house's interior, and felt it leave his fingers like releasing a bird or a wish or a small piece of evidence in a crime he didn't yet understand. Back home, he felt the absence immediately. His pocket was empty now, just a small void where the card had pressed against his leg. He found himself reaching for it without thinking during dinner, while watching television, lying in bed that night with the sounds of the house settling around him like an old person easing into a chair. No response came that night, or the next day, or the day after that. By Friday, Cody had begun to regret the return. Not because he wanted the card back, though he did, desperately, in the way you miss something that's been amputated, but because the silence from next door felt louder than any response could have been. It felt like judgment, or indifference, or something worse, acknowledgement that the card's return had revealed something Cody wasn't supposed to see. He started watching the house with new intensity. From his bedroom window, which faced the side yard and offered a slanted view of the neighbor's kitchen window, he could see movement sometimes, shadows crossing behind the thin curtains, lights turning on and off with no discernible pattern. Once, very late, he saw the blue flicker of what might have been a television, though when he'd looked again a few minutes later it was dark. The man never emerged. No walks to the mailbox. No trips to the Cara beige sedan that sat in the driveway with the patience of a sleeping cat, covered in a week's worth of pollen. It was as if the man next door existed in a state of perpetual interior, a life lived entirely within walls, sustained by some mechanism that didn't require the usual human necessities of groceries or fresh air or interaction with the outside world. It was the printing on the card that kept circling back in Cody's mind, that too-sharp clarity, the feel of the card stock simultaneously cheap and advanced, like something mass-produced but with techniques that hadn't been invented yet. And the back, that single line, some paths circle back to their beginning. He was lying on his bed Saturday morning, staring at the ceiling where he'd stuck glow-in-the-dark stars in the pattern of constellations he'd learned from a book on astronomy. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, when it hit him. The card wasn't old. It was new. Not new as in recently printed, but new as in from the future. The printing techniques, the card stock, the clarity of the image, they were all anachronisms, things that didn't belong in 1991, but might exist in some later year when technology had advanced to the point where such quality was commonplace. But that was impossible. Baseball cards from the future couldn't exist. Time didn't work that way. Time was a straight line, a progression from past to present to future, as inevitable and unidirectional as a river flowing to the sea. Except some paths circle back to their beginning. Circles, not lines. Loops, time folding back on itself like paper, like a Möbius strip, like those paradoxes they'd discussed in science class when talking about Einstein and relativity, and the speed of light concepts so large and strange that they made Cody's brain hurt in a good way, the ache of expansion, of ideas too big for the small room of his skull. He sat up, his heart suddenly pounding. The card was a message. Not about baseball, not about some team that didn't exist. It was about time itself, about the possibility, no, the reality of traveling through it. But why would someone give him such a card? Why would someone from the future leave evidence of their temporal displacement in a box meant for the trash? Unless it wasn't meant for the trash. Unless it was meant for him. The thought made his skin prickle. He got up and went to the window, looking out at the house next door. The beige sedan sat in the driveway, patient and still. The windows reflected the morning sky, blank and uncommittal. Somewhere inside, the man in the denim shirt was doing what? Remembering? Planning. Existing in the strange exile of his own past. "You've been weird all week," Corey's voice made Cody jump. His brother stood in the doorway wearing the Lincoln High football t-shirt he'd been given after the championship game, holding a skateboard under one arm, a new one, purchased with his own saved money, decorated with a graphic of a skull wearing sunglasses. "I'm always weird," Cody said, which was true enough to deflect. "Yeah, but this is different weird. You keep staring at the house next door like you're expecting it to explode or something." Cody turned back to the window. "Don't you think it's strange, the guy who lives there? We cleaned his whole garage and never saw him once." "So? Some people are private." He had a hot pink tuxedo. That got Corey's attention. He stepped into the room, the skateboard clattering to the floor. "What?" "In one of the boxes, a hot pink tuxedo jacket. Like aggressively pink. The kind of thing you'd wear to, I don't know, a prom in 1985 or something." Corey's face did something complicated. A flicker of recognition quickly suppressed, followed by a careful neutrality that Cody had learned to recognize as his brother's poker face. "You saw this?"
Yeah. There was a bunch of other stuff, too. Old books, photographs, weird maps.
But the tuxedos stood out because who the hell owns something like that and then just throws it away? Corey sat down on the edge of Cody's bed, his usual teenage insouciance replaced by something more serious.
What else was in the box?
Cody hesitated. The card felt too personal, too strange to share. But the other items seemed safe enough. A book of Edgar Allan Poe poems, The Raven and stuff. A photo from some nightclub Coconut Grove, it said on the back. And a map of places I've never heard of. Dusttown. Shell Road. Indian Village. Shell Road, Corey repeated, his voice strange. You sure it said Shell Road?
Yeah, why?
But Corey was already up, pacing now, the skateboard forgotten on the floor.
Did you keep any of it?
No. We threw it all in the trash like he asked. A lie, but a protective one. The card was his secret, at least for now. Corey went to the window, looked out at the house next door with new intensity.
Shell Road is where Dad grew up, like way out past the city limits.
It's not even paved, just this dirt track that runs through what used to be farmland. There's nothing out there now. Maybe a few trailers. Some old foundations where houses used to be. Cody felt his pulse quicken.
How do you know that?
Dad told me once when we were driving past it. He pointed it out and said that's where he lived until he was 10, before Grandma and Grandpa moved to the city. He said there used to be a whole community out there, mostly families who worked the farms, but it dried up when the interstate went through and took all the business away from the main road. Why would the guy next door have a map with Shell Road on it? Corey shook his head slowly.
I don't know.
But the hot pink tuxedo... Jesus, Cody.
That's specific.
That's really specific.
What do you mean?
His brother turned from the window, his face pale under the overhead light that made everyone in the house look slightly jaundiced.
You remember Dad's high school yearbook?
The one Mom keeps in the box in the basement with all the old photo albums?
Maybe.
There's a picture in there. From prom 1973. And Dad is wearing... The phone rang downstairs, cutting him off.
Their mother's voice floated up. Corey, it's for you.
Corey didn't move immediately. He stood there, his hand on the windowsill, staring at the house next door with an expression that mixed confusion and something approaching fear.
What about the tuxedo?
Cody pressed. Later, Corey said and left. The weekend dissolved into the strange geometry of family time, a trip to the grocery store where Cody pushed the cart while his mother selected items with the precision of a general planning a campaign, an afternoon where his father tried to fix the kitchen faucet and ended up calling a plumber, a dinner of spaghetti eaten while watching America's Funniest Home Videos, the family laughing at men getting hit in the groin and dogs riding skateboards and babies making faces that adults found inexplicably hilarious. Cody kept returning to the window, watching the house next door. No movement, no lights, the beige sedan gathering pollen like a monument to stillness. Sunday morning brought rain, the kind that started as mist and gradually intensified until the whole world seemed wrapped in gray gauze. Cody lay in bed listening to it patter against the window, feeling the weight of the weekend pressing down on him, homework undone, questions unanswered, the mystery of the man next door growing larger in his mind like a tumor, crowding out thoughts of school and baseball cards and all the normal concerns of a boy about to turn 14. He thought about time. About circles, about that line on the card, some paths circle back to their beginning. What if it was literal? What if someone could actually travel backward through time, could step out of the river's flow and walk back upstream to where they'd started?
The idea was absurd.
Impossible. The stuff of science fiction movies and paperback novels like the copy of the Swiss Family Robinson he'd found in the garage box, its pages yellowed and brittle, inscribed on the inside cover in that same racing handwriting. To Cody, Christmas 1984. A gift from the future to the past, or from the past to itself, a temporal loop that made his head hurt when he tried to follow its logic.
But what if?
What if the man next door wasn't just some eccentric recluse, but someone displaced in time? Someone who'd found a way through technology or magic or some intersection of the two to travel backward, to live next door to what?
To who?
The question hung in the air like the rain, persistent and unanswerable. Monday came with a break in the weather, the clouds tearing open to reveal patches of blue sky that looked fragile and temporary, like ice on a warming lake. Cody rode the bus to school through streets still wet from the weekend rain, watching the city scroll past the window strip malls and gas stations and the occasional church with its marquee messages trying to be clever. What's missing?
You are. In first period, Mrs. Henderson talked about manifest destiny,
About how Americans in the 1800s believed it was their divine right and destiny to expand westward, to claim the land from sea to shining sea, never mind the people already living there. She showed them a map of Indian territories, those irregular shapes that had once covered the continent like a patchwork quilt, and then showed them another map from 50 years later, where those territories had shrunk to tiny dots, remnants, reservations. Whole villages were uprooted, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice carrying that particular tone teachers used when trying to convey the weight of historical tragedy.
Entire cultures displaced.
Ways of life that had existed for thousands of years, erased in a generation.
Cody thought about the map in the box.
Indian village site. Another piece of geography that might have existed once and now was just a memory, a label on a hand-drawn map in a stranger's garage. At lunch, he sat with his usual group, Brian and Marcus and sometimes Jennifer, though she'd been avoiding them lately since she'd started hanging out with the girls who wore too much makeup and smoked in the bathroom. They talked about the upcoming baseball season, about whether the Twins would repeat their championship, about the new cordless phone Marcus's family had gotten that let you walk around the house while talking, which seemed like magic compared to the wall-mounted phone in Cody's kitchen with its coiled cord that always got tangled.
My mom says cordless phones cause brain cancer, Brian said, unwrapping his sandwich peanut butter and jelly, the same thing every day.
Like the radiation or whatever.
Everything causes cancer according to somebody's mom, Marcus countered. My mom thinks microwaves cause cancer.
And payphones. And basically anything invented after 1960.
They laughed, but Cody found his mind wandering. Payphones. He'd seen one in the photograph from the nightclub, visible in the
background, one of those old models with the rotary dial, the kind they didn't install anymore. Another anachronism, another piece of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. After school, he came home to find his mother on the couch with her friend Diane, both of them watching television with expressions of horror and fascination. On the screen, grainy footage played on repeat. A man on the ground, being beaten by police officers, their batons rising and falling with mechanical regularity while other officers stood by and watched.
It's on every channel, his mother said without looking away from the screen. They're saying it happened in Los Angeles last month.
Someone recorded it on a video camera. Rodney King. The name was being repeated by the newscaster like a prayer or an incantation. Rodney King pulled over for speeding. Rodney King beaten 56 times. Rodney King, whose assault had been captured by a man with a camcorder standing on his apartment balcony, filming what would become one of the most replayed pieces of footage in television history. Cody stood in the doorway, his backpack still on his shoulders, watching the footage loop. The batons coming down, the man on the ground trying to protect himself, the other officers doing nothing.
They arrested him, you know, Diane was saying.
After they beat him,
charged him with resisting arrest. It's sick, his mother said. The whole thing is sick.
On the screen, the footage played again, and again, and again.
The beating that had happened weeks ago now broadcast into millions of homes, the violence made infinite through repetition, each loop a fresh trauma, a new wound opened in the collective consciousness. Cody went upstairs, feeling sick. The world was breaking open in ways he didn't understand. Not just the beating, though, that was horrible enough, but the fact that it could be recorded, broadcast, replayed endlessly. Technology was changing something fundamental about reality, about what could be witnessed and remembered and transformed into evidence. He thought about the baseball card again, about printing techniques from the future, about someone with the technology to travel through time, to bring back evidence of what hadn't happened yet. Why would someone do that? What would drive a person to leave their own time and travel backward? Unless they were trying to change something, or remember something, or warn someone. The thought made his hands shake. He went to his window, looked out at the house next door. The beige sedan was gone from the driveway. At some point during the school day, while Cody was learning about manifest destiny and eating lunch and watching Rodney King get beaten for the 100th time, the man next door had left his house, had driven somewhere, had re-entered the world in some small way.
Proof of life. Proof of existence beyond those walls. Cody felt a sudden, desperate need to know more, to understand what was happening, to solve this mystery that was eating at him like hunger or fear or the particular anxiety that came from knowing something was wrong but not knowing what. He went to Corey's room, knocked once, and entered without waiting for permission. His brother was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling, a Walkman on his chest playing something tinny through the headphones around his neck. George Michael, probably. Corey had been obsessed with Faith for months, playing it until their mother threatened to throw the cassette away. "Tell me about the tuxedo," Cody said. Corey sat up, clicked off the Walkman. His face had that serious expression again, the one that made him look older than 16, made him look like someone who'd already seen too much of how the world actually worked. "You really want to know?" "Yeah." Corey got up, went to his closet, and pulled out a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, loose and in no particular order. He shuffled through them with the practiced speed of someone who'd looked at these images many times before. "Here," he said, handing one to Cody. It was a prom photo from 1973, the colors slightly faded, the quality of the print showing its age. Their father stood in the center, young and thin, his hair longer than he wore it now, his smile awkward with teenage self-consciousness. He was wearing a tuxedo, a hot pink tuxedo. The exact shade, the exact cut, the exact shoulder pads as the jacket Cody had found in the box next door. "Holy shit," Cody whispered. "Yeah," Corey said. They stood there, the photograph between them like a bridge across decades, connecting their father's youth to the present moment, to a box in a garage, to a man who lived next door and never showed his face. "There's more," Corey said, his voice quiet. "Look at the background." Cody squinted at the photo. Behind their father and his data girl with feathered hair and a dress that looked like it was made of tinfoil was a banner hanging from the gymnasium ceiling. Spring formal 1973 theme. Kaleidoscope of dreams. And to the left, partially visible through a doorway, was a trophy case. Cody couldn't see what was in the case from the photo's angle, but he could see the plaque beneath it, just barely legible. Lincoln High School Regional Champions. Lincoln High, where Corey now went to school. Where their father had gone before him. Where, in 1973, someone had won a regional championship in something football or basketball or baseball, the sport unclear from this distance of years. "I don't understand," Cody said, though he was beginning to, the pieces assembling themselves in his mind like a puzzle solving itself, like traction on ice, like redemption after failure, like waking from a comatose state into a reality that made terrible, perfect sense. "The guy next door," Corey said slowly, carefully, like he was diffusing a bomb with words. "What if he's not just some random old dude? What if he's someone we know? Someone from our family? That's crazy. Is it? Think about it. He moves in next door, not across town, not in some other neighborhood, but right next door. He has Dad's prom tuxedo. He has a map of Shell Road where Dad grew up. He has photographs and books and... Cody, what if this isn't some stranger? What if it's... Downstairs, the television's volume suddenly increased, their mother's voice sharp with shock. "Oh my God. Oh my God." Both boys ran downstairs, taking the steps two at a time. In the living room, their parents stood transfixed before the television, where the news anchors were showing new footage. Not the beating this time. This was different. This was now. This was live. Los Angeles was burning. The trial had ended. The officers who'd beaten Rodney King, the assault captured on tape, broadcast endlessly, undeniable in its brutality, had been acquitted. All 4 officers. Not guilty on all charges except one, which ended in a hung jury. And Los Angeles had erupted. The screen showed fires blooming across the city like malignant flowers, buildings engulfed in flames, people running through streets, some carrying looted goods, others fleeing, others standing in defiance or rage or celebration or all 3 at once. A truck driver pulled from his vehicle and beaten while helicopters filmed from above. Entire blocks transformed into war zones, into spaces where the normal rules of civilization had been suspended, replaced by something older and more primal. "This is happening right now," the newscaster was saying, his voice struggling to maintain professional calm. "These are live images from South Central Los Angeles, where riots have broken out following the verdict in the Rodney King trial.
We're getting reports of looting, arson, and violence throughout the city. The mayor has called in the National Guard. This is unprecedented in modern American history. Cody watched the flames leap from roof to roof, watched the smoke rise into the California sky, watched the future burn while standing in his suburban living room in a modest house in a modest neighborhood, in a modest American city that felt very far from Los Angeles, but also, in that moment, very close. His father had his arm around his mother. Corey stood beside Cody, both of them silent. On the screen, a Korean shopkeeper stood on his roof with a rifle, protecting his store from looters. A group of young men danced in the intersection while cars burned behind them. A woman carried her child through smoke so thick it looked like fog, like the end of the world, like some biblical judgment made manifest in fire and fury. 53 people are confirmed dead, the newscaster continued. Thousands injured. Property damage estimated in the billions. This is the worst civil unrest in American history since the 1960s. The doorbell rang. Everyone jumped. The sound was so incongruous, so ordinary against the backdrop of televised chaos, that for a moment no one moved. It rang again. Cody's father went to the door, opened it. No one was there. But on the porch, in an envelope identical to the ones that had contained their payment for cleaning the garage, was a single piece of paper. Their father picked it up, unfolded it, read it. His face went white. "What is it?" their mother asked. He handed her the paper without speaking. She read it, her hand going to her mouth. Corey took it from her, Cody reading over his shoulder. The note was typed on that same typewriter with the uneven keys, the raised D. It said, "The tuxedo was my father's. He wore it to his prom in 1973. He told me once it was the stupidest thing he'd ever owned, but he kept it anyway because it reminded him of who he was before everything changed. I found it in his things after he died. I've carried it across years and miles and through spaces you can't imagine. I didn't mean for you to find it. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But since you did, you should know, some paths circle back to their beginning not to change what happened, but to understand it, to make peace with it, to say goodbye to the person you were before you became the person you are. Tell Cody thank you for returning the card. Tell him I'm sorry for the confusion. Tell him that when he turns 48, he'll understand why I had to come back. Why I had to see this house, this street, this moment one more time before it's too late. Tell him." The note ended there, mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted or had changed their mind or had simply run out of ways to explain the inexplicable. In the living room, Los Angeles continued to burn. The television showed a building collapse, its structure finally surrendering to the flames, concrete and steel folding inward like a dying star, like the end of something that had seemed permanent, like proof that everything cities, civilizations, the very fabric of time itself was more fragile than anyone wanted to believe. Corey looked at Cody. Cody looked back. Outside, through the window, they could see the house next door. The lights were on now, all of them, every window blazing with illumination as if the house itself had been set on fire from within. And in one of those windows, the kitchen window, the one Cody could see from his bedroom, stood a figure. A man in a denim shirt, his face still turned away, still refusing to be fully seen, but his posture suggesting exhaustion or relief, or the particular weariness that comes from carrying a secret too long, from traveling too far from home, from being 48 years old and standing in the kitchen of a house you used to live in, watching a family you used to belong to, remembering a version of yourself that existed 35 years ago, and also right now, simultaneously, in a loop of time that circles back to its beginning like a snake eating its tail, like a safe return from exploration, like premarital confessions made too late, like cordless connections to pay phone memories, like all the ways the past and future bleed into each other when you stop believing time moves in only one direction. The figure in the window raised one hand. Not quite a wave, not quite a salute, just an acknowledgement, a recognition, a small gesture that said, "I see you. I remember you. I am you."
And then the lights went out one by one until the house next door was dark again, and Cody stood in his living room while Los Angeles burned, and his parents held each other, and his brother's hand gripped his shoulder, both of them staring at the note that explained everything and nothing, that raised more questions than it answered, that promised understanding only after 35 more years had passed, only after Cody had lived enough life to circle back to this moment and finally comprehend why someone would travel through time not to change history, but simply to witness it one more time. To stand in the presence of your former self and remember what it felt like to be young and confused, and on the edge of understanding something vast and terrible and beautiful about the nature of existence itself. On the television, a building burned. Next door, a time traveler sat in darkness, and Cody, almost 14, held a note from his future self and tried to imagine what could possibly happen in the next 35 years that would drive him to do something as impossible, as desperate, as achingly human as traveling back through time to say goodbye to the boy he used to be.